Buenas tardes. Bienvenidos al Festival de Capstone de la Escuela de Humanidades y Comunicación, o HCOM, de la primavera de 2023. Mi nombre es Delia Jiménez y seré su maestra de ceremonias en español.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the School of Humanities and Communications Spring 2023 Capstone Festival. My name is Sophia Moreno, and I will be serving as the English-speaking Master of Ceremonies.
Antes de comenzar el programa, queremos compartir el reconocimiento de la tierra de HCOM. La Universidad Estatal de California, Monterey Bay, son tierras que habitan encima del pueblo indígena de HCOM, también conocidas como el HCOM, Carmeleno, Monterey Band y Rumson. Están en la patria rica de los HCOM, donde HCOM no solamente prospera como una institución de educación avanzada, pero también provee una abundante educación de servicio y experiencia a una comunidad diversa de aprendedores. De tal manera que los estudiantes, maestros, facultad, exalumnos y los miembros de nuestra comunidad exploran los terrenos de la escuela universitaria, recuerdan de respetar la tierra y tomar en cuenta su belleza natural. Recuerden que los ancestros descansan debajo de los pasillos y otras áreas menos transitadas en los terrenos de la universidad. Estamos aquí, Lecala.
Before today's program, we would like to begin with the CSUMB land acknowledgement. California State University, Monterey Bay resides in the indigenous homeland of the Esalen people, also known as Carmelo, Monterey Band, and Rumson. It is on the rich homeland of the Esalen where CSUMB not only thrives as an institution of higher education, but also provides an education abundant with service and experience to a diverse community of learners. As our students, staff, faculty, alumni, and community members explore the university's campus, remember to respect the land and take note of the natural beauty. Remember that ancestors rest below pathways and in other less traveled areas on campus. We are here. Let Kai live.
Les queremos agradecer a los estudiantes, familiares y amigos que nos acompañan el día de hoy. Igualmente, deseamos agradecer a todos los profesores y el personal de la Universidad Estatal de California, Baja de Monterrey, por su compromiso con la visión de la universidad.
We would like to thank the students, families, and friends who have joined us today. Equally so, we wish to thank the faculty and staff of California State University, Monterey Bay for their commitment to the university's vision.
Los proyectos de Capstone reflejan el trabajo de los estudiantes del programa de Humanidades y Comunicación y su concentración en varias áreas de estudio. Estos proyectos traen a la luz temas de gran interés para cada uno de nosotros. Además, muestran nuestro esfuerzo, crecimiento intelectual y personal. Al igual, reflejan el apoyo de nuestros profesores.
The Capstone projects reflect the work of students majoring in humanities and communications with a concentration in a number of study areas. They bring to light issues we are passionate about. These projects represent our intellectual and personal growth and reflect the support of our professors.
Este año tenemos 3 secciones del curso de Capstone. Cada sección se ha dedicado a explorar un tema en particular. El primer tema es democracia en crisis, el pasado, presente y futuro, liderado por el maestro David A. Reichert. El segundo tema es historias escondidas, las historias que nos dan forma, liderado por la maestra Lee Richard. Y el tercer tema es alimentos, ética y capitalismo, liderado por el maestro L.G. Abraham. Los estudiantes han tenido la opción de explorar estos temas a través de discusión en seminarios, haciendo un trabajo de investigación o un proyecto creativo.
This year, we have 3 sections of our senior capstone course. Each section has devoted its efforts to explore a particular theme. The first section theme is Democracy in Crisis, Past, Present, and Future, led by Professor David A. Rickard. The second section theme is Hidden Histories, the Stories That Shape Us, with Professor Lee Richard. And finally, the third section theme is Food, Ethics, and Capitalism, led by Professor Algie Abraham. Students in each section have explored these themes through seminar discussion and by working on a research paper or a creative project.
Hoy tenemos el gusto de escuchar a estudiantes seleccionados presentando sobre sus proyectos. Con estas presentaciones, ustedes podrán apreciar el trabajo de investigación sobre el tema que cada clase exploró.
Today's festival showcases selected students from each section who will give a brief presentation about their projects.
Y ahora, invitamos al director de la escuela de HCOM, el Dr. Fong Nguyen, para darles la bienvenida al Festival de Capstone Primavera de 2023.
And now, we would like to invite the chair for the School of Humanities and Communications, Dr. Fong Nguyen, to personally welcome you to the Spring 2023 Capstone Festival.
Good afternoon, everybody, and congratulations to our graduating seniors. I've seen a preview of today's program, and all I can say is that I am extremely proud of every single one of you. The passion and dedication you put into your project shows, and I look forward to learning more about your research today. Capstone is one of the great traditions of HCOM. It is a very public and very personal reflection of the inspiring, intellectual, and artistic passions that drive our student scholars. It is also a reflection of the wonderful faculty who provided guidance and mentorship along the way. Our faculty take turns teaching Capstone. It's a lot of work, but something we ultimately love because of the opportunity to help seniors turn their vision into reality. This semester, let's give it up for Dave Reichard, Lee Richard, and Ajit Abraham for their wonderful work teaching Capstone. Also give a big round of applause to our HCOM professional staff, Wendy Rutledge, Glenn Maxon, and Rupal Hall. The unsung heroes who make things happen every single day. As well as to the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences for their support. And now, without further ado, let's turn the program back over to our MC. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Dr. Nguyen, por sus palabras de bienvenida. Y ahora vamos a introducir a los presentadores que fueron seleccionados en cada clase.
Thank you, Dr. Nguyen, for your welcome. And now we would like to begin the presentations prepared by selected presenters from each section.
Para seguir, damos la bienvenida a nuestro primer expositor del tema Democracia en Crisis, el pasado, presente y futuro, Ignacio Maravilla.
Now, please join us in welcoming our first presenter representing the theme Democracy in Crisis, Ignacio Maravilla.
Hola, mi nombre es Ignacio Maravilla. My name is Ignacio Maravilla, and I will not be presenting my speech. My father used to tell me, never judge a man when his values do not align with yours. Instead, contextualize his values by learning about the culture he comes from. My father has given me plenty of advice over the years, but this particular piece of advice has stood out above the rest. Humans and the societies they form, or governments they form, are incredibly complex and unique, and they should be treated as such. The same methods used to successfully govern one country might not work for another. And the same can be said for the microbe. No two individuals live identical lives, and no two households hold the same rules. This reality has been observed for as long as humans have had consciousness. We may share similar patterns as mammals. However, our complexities become increasingly apparent when the details emerge. This interesting characteristic of human behavior is what inspired me to investigate how it works between two different democracies, Mexico and the United States. As an American of Mexican descent, whose concentration is in American legal studies, I quickly learned that the Mexican legal system almost identically mirrors the American legal system. One example of just how similar these two legal systems are is that both the United States and Mexico share an amendment in their respective constitutions that provide extensive protections on speech. And in this particular case, protections on journalistic free speech. Now, this similarity in legislation between the two countries highlights my earlier points of what works for one country does not necessarily mean it will work for the other. Overall, current issues aside, the United States has been able to maintain a fairly successful press within its country with very little concerns on restrictions of expression. However, the same cannot be said for the United States' neighboring country, Mexico. Mexico's press has been struggling for the better part of the last 50 years, constantly censoring what they publish out of fear for their lives. Which begs an important question. Why, despite having a near identical legal system and constitution, is Mexico succeeding at maintaining a free press while Mexico seems to be falling behind? My research paper reviews and examines several key reasons as to why one country is far more successful than the other in protecting journalistic free speech. And what I found was that most of the success the United States has had can be contextualized with the values that American culture has held historically. For example, the American Revolution has always been about proper representation, whether that be through taxation or speech. American culture has always valued autonomy, and that value is evident even today. Mexico's revolution, however, was mostly about the unequal distribution of land. Providing sufficient land for every Mexican citizen was the value that was highlighted in this revolution. And this value for more land and power is evident today with the current land disputes that we see with the current cartels. Most, if not all, of the evidence I provide within my research paper seem to be sufficient to suggest that Mexico's failure has very little to do with the legislation implemented after its revolution. It instead has more to do with the complexities of human societies, the values they hold, and the cultures they create. My goal in writing this paper is to persuade others to consider this point of view. After all, if we treat societies with the same care and understanding as we do one another, we could potentially extend this free sense of self to the rest of the world, regardless of race, ethnicity, or self-identification. Thank you very much for your time. Further ado, please give it up for Giselle Antonio, our next speaker.
Hello, everyone. Buenas tardes. My name is Giselle Antonio. So I've done a capstone on autohistoria and autohistoria teoría. So the title of my capstone is Todos somos poseedores de conocimiento. And my question that was, the thesis question for my capstone was, how autohistoria and autohistoria teoría challenge post-colonial perspectives? Oh, and I want to give a quick shout out to my research mentor who has been helping me to do this, Dr. Chrissy Hernandez. So first I wanted to start off with who Gloria Anzaldúa is. So she created autohistoria. She's one of the main scholars that writes about this topic. So she's a Chicana scholar of Chicana culture and feminist theory and queer theory. She developed the practice of writing through the self. She believes that through narrative that you come to understand and know yourself and make sense of the world. So now I'm going to go over what autohistoria and autohistoria teoría is. Autohistoria, conectando experiencias personales con realidades sociales, connecting personal experiences with social realities. So this is a deep search for cultural and personal meaning. Autohistoria focuses on our personal story, but it also, as we tell our story, we tell the stories of others. So really emphasizing that our experience is not unique to us, but it's also the experience of other students or other people. Autohistoria teoría, really similar to autohistoria, conectando experiencias personales con realidades sociales and theorizing about this activity. So now that we're taking our personal experiences, our embodied experiences, now we're creating theory from it. And that's essentially what I wrote about. It's a way to illuminate knowledge and is symbolic to the relationship between the self, spirit, and the world. So why did I decide to write about this? So the roots of academia is around white ideologies and Eurocentric research. I'm like seeing myself. And Eurocentric research. So they use this research to make implications of the experiences of people of color. So this is why I decided to write about this. The theme of my class was hidden histories. So it was a really kind of like a good segue to kind of write about this topic because we're telling the stories of the people whose stories are usually hidden in academia. So utilizing autohistoria as a decolonial research methodology, we're able to listen to the stories of biracial and indigenous people of color. And in doing this, we are challenging the white dominant perspective of research. So I'm specifically focusing on the research aspect of it. And then in explaining the uniqueness of Anzadua's autohistoria, we also emphasize the importance of knowledge coming from the self and considering our experiences, our embodied experiences, the experiences of others to be a form of knowledge as well. For example, when we are in a classroom, we usually see a teacher as a holder of knowledge, but thinking of it as being we're holders of knowledge, but also the teacher is, we're going to share knowledge with each other. So that's essentially what I wrote about. And why I decided to write about this topic is because this is something I'm really passionate about. I've been learning about this since my freshman year here at CSUND. And it's actually an extension of the research that I'm doing with Dr. Chrissy Hernandez and the research that we're continuing over the summer. So thank you.
Just a pull. Okay, I'll just hold it since I'm short. Hi, my name is Trisha Engel, and today I'll be talking about my capstone on socioeconomic factors on food-related education. I also had to incorporate a lesson plan into my capstone because I am an ESMP student here at CSUMB. Someone said something in the chat. Okay, I'll just continue. So I chose my topic. Oh, can you go back to the first one, please? Thank you. I chose my topic because I am going to be an English teacher after graduation. I'm going to be attending Fresno State in the fall to get my teaching credential. So you can go back to that. Thank you. Okay, you can go next. Okay, so on this slide is the abstract of my paper, which is basically the heart and soul of my entire paper. It reads as follows: in the education system, K through 12 schools are required to implement different health education programs that aim to teach students about nutrition and other important topics in order to combat the growing problem of childhood obesity. Socioeconomic factors such as race, ethnicity, poverty, and income level can directly influence the quality of education that students receive. Inclusivity and quality can directly influence, inclusivity and quality in the curriculum are put at risk depending upon these factors. And teachers have a critical role in putting in place a curriculum that focuses on giving students a learning experience that permits them to be transparent about their nutritional and family backgrounds. My paper and project examines how socioeconomic factors are connected to the quality of education delivered and explores the ways that K through 12 teachers are able to foster an environment that allows students to be transparent about their backgrounds and learn about food in an inclusive fashion. So my research focused on basically three main factors, I say kind of for because income level kind of connects with poverty. So I say that these three kind of four are the main socioeconomic factors that determine the quality of education. In regards to race, my studies found that Black students from low-income urban areas were actually found to receive lower test scores on nutritional-based tests than their white counterparts from rural areas. When I investigated ethnicity, I found that teachers with student bodies of more than 80% non-white students, or fewer than 80% non-white students, taught significantly more hours than schools with fewer than 80% non-white students, or more than 80%, sorry, they get confused. The teachers at schools with fewer than 80% non-white students taught between 5 and 6 hours more of nutritional education than the teachers at the other schools. Finally, teachers at impoverished schools identified the biggest barrier to providing a quality health education as inadequate funding. So they were surveyed in Michigan and at low-income schools, and they found that teachers really felt that the schools were underfunded and that they could not provide quality education. This all really connects to each other because obesity prevalence was 26.2 among Hispanic children, 24.8 among non-Hispanic Black children, 16.6 among non-Hispanic white children, and 9% among non-Hispanic Asian children. These factors are all very interconnected because migrant, low-income, and inner-city families, urban families, are usually within the lower funded areas due to lower property values in those areas. And so as a teacher and other educators can implement cultural awareness, a plethora of options, and seek to avoid stigmatizing language about food. So here are some of the sources I used in my project. Thank you so much for listening. And I would like to introduce my classmate, Brendan Dervish.
I want to say it might not actually have the full.
No.
presentation on it.
What is it? I don't know. Hey,
Brendan, they have.
Brendan,
You got it?
you didn't send in your
Oh,
slides.
okay, cool. So it looks like I'm gonna be doing it a cappella per se. So,
Yeah.
Go Brandon.
So basically mine is on food for thought, the forgotten education of American culture. And I wanted to study this because I realized that despite being a completely universal natural resource, I knew so little about food. Because we basically learned about the food pyramid, we learned about the nutrients, but we haven't learned about what's an actual different things that we need to be able to use for food, and different ways to distinguish what is actually good for us to eat and what is not good for us to eat. So just picture an orange and white slide that says abstract for this part. And so for my abstract, basically I was talking about why is it that food is such a common natural resource and none of us really know that much about it. And I think part of that is the fact that we haven't taken the time to really learn more about food and learn about the different ways that we could actually understand it. And one of these ways that we can understand it is through the labeling, which is honestly one of the most misleading practices in the food industry, because it's meant to look a certain way. It's meant to have a few keywords that tell you proteins, fats, things like this are basically meant to tell you that's what they are. But because people know what protein is, people know what fats are. So if you see fats on something and you see proteins on something, then you're not gonna be more inclined to buy the thing that has fats on it. But if there's low fats and there's high fats, then you're gonna be able to buy the thing with low fats, but there's still fats in it. So it's basically a way of trying to make people buy their products, even though it has stuff that's not actually good in it. Another one of these is sugar, which is called a bunch of different titles. One of them is fructose, because if you see sugar on your package, you're not gonna wanna actually buy it. But if you see something like fructose, you're not gonna know what that means. And there's so many different labeling things as on the imaginary nutrition label picture here, but there's so much on it that you're not gonna actually be able to distinguish the different ways that it actually has it, because low fats and high fats are very similar to each other. And there's not too much of a big difference between them. And for another way is actual food production, which is something we don't really think about because we just go to the grocery store and we just get a bunch of food. So we don't think about how the animals are treated, how the companies market the products, and even the fact that there's not actually a lot of really sanitary practices within it. The FDA does have a lot of guidelines about how to do this correctly, but instead of that, there's also a lot of diseases that you can get from producing food, such as Salmonella and E. coli, which you can get from cooking raw food, and even animals themselves could get microbiology, which are basically organisms, parasitic organisms that attach themselves to the animals that could actually make them a lot more basically susceptible to being cooked and being eaten, and people actually getting parasites. Now, another aspect of it is the capitalism aspect of food, which is basically there's supposed to be a bunch of logos on there, like McDonald's, Wendy's, all those. You could pretty much recognize so many of these logos because they've become something more than just fast food. They've sort of become a movement per se. They've become something that's even greater than and even more powerful than we can ever imagine. So, but it's not healthy, and they're not going to tell us, oh yeah, here, don't have our food because it's not healthy, because it's advertised everywhere. You see it on billboards, you see it on any corner store you're at, and there's a lot of different ways that you can do that to make people want to eat at these places more. And that kind of raises the ethics question of, is it really ethical to be marketing these foods that are knowingly filled with some not so great products in them to the American people? And my final slide was about food education, because there's so much really talk about, oh, we should be more educated about our food, or oh, we should do this or shouldn't do this. But at the end of the day, there's actually a few resources, and there's some companies that are willing to help out people with this. For example, Dole, the fruit company, has a list of their favorite types of fruits on their website and has some education resources within it. And another one is a pre-K group that did something called a Harvest of the Month program, which is basically something that has fruits that are in season, vegetables and crops that are basically in season for each month, so that you can actually know which one you're going to be able to do. And yeah, so I'm sure looking at a random thing is super fun, but yeah, hopefully you guys have fun with that. And the next presenter is Sierra Fishman.
My name is Sierra Fishman, and I am presenting my creative project, Crafting Journalism, the Pseudonyms of American Reform. The late 19th and early 20th centuries in the United States saw the rise of the stunt girls and sob sisters in journalism. These pioneering women defied traditional societal expectations of housewives and pursued careers in reporting, gaining recognition for their accomplishments through the dangerous nature of their work. While many may know the name Nellie Bly, the pseudonym for Elizabeth Jane Cochran, other reporters played a vital role in the transformation of journalism, including
Nellie Bly herself. She was one of the most famous reporters. She covered the mistreatment of mentally ill patients in Blackwell. Iola, girl reporter, Eva Gay. And then the Slab sisters, Kaloit, Dorothy Dix, Meb, and Olivia, and Annie Laurie. It's important to recognize the incredible impact these women had on American society. To honor their contributions, this project features a quilt of the United States with an augmented reality display showcasing the achievements of each of these women, whose work spurred reforms throughout the legal, medical, judicial, and egalitarian sectors of the United States. Okay, so the last slide isn't here, but the quilt I've created is simple in design, representing the domesticity expected of women. A pretty domestic task, this quilt hides the immense contributions made by women just under the surface. When scanned with an iPad, this quilt hides an augmented reality overlay, which reveals the women who helped change the course of American history. Please welcome back our MCs Delia Jimenez and Sofia Moreno.
Ahora les invitamos afuera al patio a disfrutar de unas bebidas refrescantes y aprender más acerca de los magníficos proyectos que otros estudiantes han hecho. Cada uno de ellos tiene un credencial de nombre y un código donde pueden ver sus presentaciones en tu teléfono. Algunos de los proyectos también estarán mostrados en los salones de clases cruzando el patio.
We now invite you to get some refreshments outside in the courtyard and learn more about the amazing projects other students have completed. Each of them has a name tag and QR code where you can view their posters on your phone. Some posters will also be on display in classrooms across the courtyard.
Un grupo selecto de presentaciones serán compartidas aquí en este auditorio y en Zoom. Si se quedan aquí, favor de no traer alimentos o bebidas, a menos de que sean botellas de agua. Regresaremos aquí para algunas presentaciones orales más y una ceremonia de certificados en unos 30 minutos. Disfruten.
A select group of posters will be shared here in this auditorium and on Zoom. If you stay here, please do not bring food or drink other than a bottle of water into this auditorium. We will return back here for a few more presentations and a certificate ceremony in about 30 minutes. Enjoy.
Hi, everybody. My name is Alyssa Phillips, and I am in Dr. Reichardt's section, Democracy in Crisis. And I did my presentation on a call for civility in politics, disrespectful rhetoric, and democracy. So my inspiration for this project was how politics in the last decade have become increasingly hostile and insulting. And I really wanted to explore how this disrespectful rhetoric amongst politicians can affect democracy. So my questions for you all is, does the normalization of open instability by politicians affect your own trust in democracy? And how does it affect public trust in democracy? So here's some examples of some of the insulting rhetoric that we've seen from politicians. The first one would be from Trump when he called our current president, Joe Biden, low IQ Joe. He's also referred to his past political adversary, Hillary Clinton, as crooked Hillary. He's also referred to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez as a whack job. And our current president, Joe Biden, has also referred to Donald Trump as the clown. And Marjorie Taylor Greene has said that all Democrats are pedophiles. And Hillary Clinton has also said that Trump lives in his own reality. So obviously these are very unprofessional. And it seems unfair to me that politicians are held to a different standard than average people are, because I believe that if average people treated their coworkers in this manner, that they would likely be fired. So it doesn't seem fair to me that politicians can get away with this. And it leaves me to wonder what kind of effects this has on democracy as a whole. So some of the analysis of the incivility we can see, when we look at it through a rhetorical lens, we can see devices such as ad hominem attacks, which is when an opponent is attacked using personal insults rather than the merit of their character or their ability to do their job. This can be distracting from the point of a debate because it focuses on the opponent's personal character, which is irrelevant to the conversation. We can also see straw man arguments in which the opposing side is painted in a extremist sort of light, and it makes it easier to knock down that argument when it's not exactly valid. And then we can also see hasty generalizations, which is when the opposing side is framed in a very general light. This would be seen as such as when Majority Taylor Greene called all Democrats pedophiles. Obviously, this is a huge generalization, and it makes it a lot easier for her to say that Democrats are bad when she can call them all pedophiles. Obviously, this generalization is not true. So I wanted to talk about the gravitation towards digital media, as well as the echo chambers that algorithms create on there, and how this can encourage the spread of hate. So Americans have gravitated towards partisan digital news media lately. We can see this in areas such as like Fox News, CNN. A lot of these news companies will have more partisan commentary-based style news instead of just giving the facts. And this can be combined with social media echo chambers, which is when algorithms create a sort of thing where when you like to see a certain side of politics, that it's all you end up seeing because the algorithm wants you to stay engaged. So this creates an echo chamber, and you only get to see others that agree with your point of view. This can encourage political hate speech because you're riled up from this audience that you have of your own echo chamber, and this can make it really easy to dehumanize the other side. So dehumanizing the other side really increases political polarization, and this allows for harsh insults with no remorse, and this decreases the possibility of compromise, which is the inherent goal of politics. When we resort to name calling and insulting the other side, it makes it extremely difficult to want to work together with that other side to come to a solution to a problem. So I believe that this affects public trust in democracy, and this was found in my research, that incivility and extreme polarization breeds an atmosphere of distrust in the opposing side, and this translates to distrust in the overall democratic system. So to conclude, political polarization and decreased political trust are associated with political instability. Regardless of the political party we are in, we must learn to respect each other and move forward to evolve as a society and regain trust in democracy. Thank you, everybody, for listening.
I decided to do a podcast on the current state of United States democracy. The reason for it, it became clear to me from watching the news in the past 8 years that U.S. democracy has unraveled and become unstable. I'm concerned, and many Americans are also concerned. A 2022 Quinnipiac University poll revealed that 67% of Americans believe that American democracy is on the brink of collapse, and for good reason. Freedom House, democracy watchdog group, has given the United States 83 out of 100 in freedom score. That's 11. That's an 11-point drop from like a decade ago. So I spoke to U.S. Representative Zoe Lofgren. She represents California's 18th district, which is my district. We touched on Americans' belief in U.S. democracy, the January 6th insurrection, her faith in U.S. democracy, which she says it's a little shaken, but still she still has faith. Its impact on how she does her job, and democracy's future in the U.S. three takeaways that I got from our conversation was he blames the Trump administration and Republican leadership for enabling him, the administration for our current state of democracy in the U.S. She touts the bills she and her colleagues have put forth to protect democracy. One bill she mentions is the H.R. 1, the For the People Act, which she said that it puts power back in the hands of the American people by limiting big money in politics, making it easier to vote, and ending partisan gerrymandering. She also calls on politicians and Americans to do their part in protecting democracy in the United States. And she ends her final response with these two questions for Americans. I thought they were great questions too that she asked. And yeah, that's my presentation.
My name is Rachel Martinez Steele, and I took Food Ethics and Capitalism with Dr. Abraham. And my project is titled Food Alternatives to Western Medicine, the Struggle and Fight for Food Sovereignty. So next is my abstract, which I can read. So this project will examine how and if food can be used as a treatment for certain diseases and illnesses, taking a historical look and a current look on how deep and powerful food medicine has been and can be. Also, how food sovereignty may in fact be the key to solving food insecurity problems that plague communities nationally. Ultimately, I will be researching, or I did research, how food can be used as an alternative to Western medicine to help alleviate or cure certain diseases and ailments related to our health, as well as fighting for food justice with food sovereignty as a solution. There is evidence to show that food sovereignty has the ability to uncover and zoom in on corporate powers within the food systems currently in place. Food sovereignty can and will expose the current food systems and the health crises that they cause and enable. However, both food sovereignty and food medicine will ultimately need to gain a large acceptance from communities to make it up the governmental and scientific ladders. My goal is to inspire that change. So what is food medicine? Food medicine refers to a spectrum of services and health interventions that recognize and respond to the critical link between nutrition and chronic illness. So if we look on the right, there's a pyramid about prevention. It goes from prevention to treatment up that pyramid. So at the bottom, there's things like SNAP, WIC, all that. And then as it slowly goes up at the top for treatment, there's medically tailored meal programs, medically tailored food packages. And so with that, if looking back on the history of food medicine briefly, I don't know if anybody is familiar with things like TMC, traditional, like Chinese traditional medicines, Ayurvedic practices. So those are all have deep historic roots, and actually Ayurveda, derived in India, is actually considered to be an equivalent to Western medicine. And so it has a long-standing history, but unfortunately, like I said in the abstract, getting that governmental and scientific, backing is what really makes it very, very difficult for them, for food medicine to be taken seriously and even get to the point of Western medicine. And that's why it's something that honestly was really hard to research and study, because there's not a lot about it or on it. So with that, I found during my research, a way that food has been used or can be used actually in the helping and preventing of COVID. So plants and foods have been known to cure and treat viral diseases. COVID-19 is a viral disease. There was a study taken of 20 food plants that contain immunomodulatory and antiviral properties. These foods are able to enhance our immune systems as well as cure respiratory tract infections, which is what COVID-19 is. So with that being said, the research journal that I got this from did a study about these foods being a preventative measure against COVID-19. This prevention is done by examining what foods have immunomodulatory functions that are combative to COVID-19. Ingesting these immunomodulatory foods, which have functions within the foods that can enhance humoral and cell mediated immunity, as well as provoking natural killer cells to become enhanced, which in turn acts as a way to strengthen your immune system against viruses. And so with that being said, they did a study of all these different over here, these biological activities, and these anti-inflammatory, antioxidants, anti-cancer, all this stuff. And so finding the foods that you can eat that help enhance those cells in your body. And so the study found that the tea plant, when it's boiled and then drank, it has incredible antiviral properties that can activate those cells or genes in your body that are actually affected by COVID-19. So when you ingest this, it might not necessarily prevent COVID from happening, but if you have COVID, or if you start, drinking this or making it a part of your routine now throughout, it might in fact have the ability to, I guess in a sense, like act as a barrier. I like to compare it as like a daily vitamin, or just, setting up like a prevention for that. So that was a really cool thing to look at. And so next, what we're looking at is, sorry, my screen. Oh, my screen is, I can't see anything at the top. Is food insecurity. So I was thinking during this project, accessibility to foods, this all sounds great, and using food as medicine and all that. If you figure out what you're doing and do some research and all that, it can definitely, sorry, this is like jumping around a bunch. Thinking about food insecurity and how many people in the United States are food insecure. In 2021, 89.8% of US households were food insecure throughout the year. The remaining 10.2% of households were food insecure at least sometime during the year. So if there's so much food insecurity and there's a global epidemic about food insecurity, then how are households going to be able to even get the foods to be able to practice food medicine should they want to? And so that's why I was like, how, like the bridge between those two things. So food insecurity is measured across socioeconomic and demographic backgrounds. Most affected are the following demographics: African-American, Hispanic, never married persons, divorced or separated persons, renters, young people, and less educated persons. The food effects of food insecurity are greater levels of depression in adults, long-term health problems, potential dental problems, as well as overall higher risks for chronic illness. So the project kind of like trickled into one thing, into another thing, into another thing, to like kind of come to a full circle. So food insecurity, how do we now solve food insecurity? So through food sovereignty and food justice, these are ways in which food insecurity can be changed. So food sovereignty is designed for communities to create their own food designs and regulations when it comes to food and accessibility within communities. The food system currently allows for no say from communities in food production, what to produce, and who gets the final say in products. Fighting for food sovereignty can change all that, and there can be new food systems in which communities are able to have a say in things. So basically taking out that middleman of those big companies. We can see it all the time that actually local farmers are getting bought out by giant companies, and they're making a huge profit, and then all that produce or whatever is being bought is being resold back into those same communities. So food sovereignty is achievable through food justice and vice versa. And so with that, how can you get involved? And there's many ways to get involved in communities all over the state, probably all over the country. But locally, I live in Santa Cruz. So there's a great program called Food What in Santa Cruz. It's a youth empowerment program for food justice in Monterey Bay, Everyone's Harvest, which was actually derived from a CSUMB student from their Capstone project. And that student made a whole nonprofit about it, which is great, to provide access to healthy, affordable fruits and vegetables through certified farmers markets and community food programs. And then in Salinas, there's the Agriculture and Land-Based Training Association, creates opportunities for low-income field laborers through land-based training in organic farm management, helping them advance their careers or pursue their dreams of farm ownership, which again links back to food sovereignty. So yeah, it was kind of a culmination of things. Like I said, the food medicine kind of trickled into food insecurity, which then came back full circle to food justice. So yeah, my project goes into all that, the histories of food medicine, food justice and just getting involved in all that. So thank you everybody for listening and who checked out my project. Especially special thank you to Dr. Abraham for everything this semester. And remember to get involved, try something new. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so my project, well, I was in the third capstone section with Dr. Abraham, Food Ethics and Capitalism, and my presentation or my project is titled Prison to Table: Systemic Injustice in Food Production. So for this project, I researched the constitutional history of slavery in order to create parallels between the modern use of prison labor to emphasize the role of systemic racism in America. But in order to align with the topic of this class, I looked into the labor prisoners do in food production, both agricultural/farm labor to work done in factories that are related to food. So the questions that guided my research were how has slavery contributed to the constitutional justification for prison labor? What are the motivations to keep the system in place? And can labor conditions be improved for prisoners? So slavery and the Constitution. So the Fifth Amendment, I think people may be familiar with when people say I plead the Fifth, but it also has to do with property rights. So the amendment states that private property shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. So slaves were property, and through them, slaveholders were able to accumulate wealth and social status. It was actually used as a defense for property in a Supreme Court case called Dred Scott versus Sanford. And eventually there were compromises made to acknowledge the humanity of slaves, but it would not be formally done until the 13th Amendment. And it had one exception to it. So slavery and indentured servitude would be allowed as punishment. So throughout history, we have seen the evolution of forced labor. We start with slavery and move on to labor post-slavery, which contributed to the rise of prison labor. And then we see contemporary prison labor. So there are similarities within each, but something important to acknowledge is that these methods change alongside the social and political climate and become more covert. Slavery has clear racial ties, and perhaps we might not immediately consider that when we look at prison labor today, but Black people and people of color are affected by incarceration and this particular branch of prison labor, which is the food sector, at disproportionate rates. For the ethics portion of this, the ethics portion is really tied to my findings, and I found that abuse is very prevalent, and especially when people are doing agricultural work. So it may differ, but at one prison, I believe it was the Louisiana State Penitentiary, this is where if prisoners were unable to do work, they were threatened with solitary confinement. And we also must acknowledge that in prison, healthcare is very poor. So people are punished for being unable to work when they are unable to address the medical concerns that may impede their ability to do that work. And it is also a racialized industry. So Black, Indigenous, people of color are more likely to be assigned agricultural works in modern prison labor. But also, I found that some of the farms that prisoners do work on today were once actual plantations, and this is pretty common in the South. Additionally, people are paid very low wages, and they may earn between a few cents to a few dollars. And a very big portion of that is usually deducted for fees such as housing. And this is a photo captured by Keith Calhoun, who has photographed the Louisiana State Penitentiary. And he has this exhibition where he photographs them throughout the years. And typically people, as we can see, the man on the horseback, he is armed, and that is not an uncommon thing for people to do there. And so the use of prison labor is really tied to the original institution of slavery. I think it's quite covert, but if we analyze the system further, we can see the ties to it. And there is a constitutional defense to this through the 13th Amendment, but it can be argued that the 8th Amendment can be used to enforce protections for the worker. And that is it.
Una vez más, bienvenidos. Ahora escucharemos a un segundo grupo de estudiantes presentadores. Por favor, reciban al próximo presentador representado al título de Democracia e Crisis, Octavio Valdovinos.
Welcome back. We will now hear from a second group of student presenters. Please welcome our next presenter representing the theme Democracy in Crisis, Octavio Valdovinos.
Sorry about that.
You're good, you're good.
For my friends and loved ones, this one's for you. When thinking about the topic of democracy, we all have a discerned memory. Whether it was hearing about it or even learning about it, we all have a memory. Most of all, we all remember when we had our first real encounter with the democratic system itself. Growing up, I remember the first time the democracy really stuck out with me. It was actually in the 8th grade as I learned about it in class. I found it interesting how it incorporated opinions from everyone to make one united system. Learning about the term democracy, I learned that my teachers and loved ones always praised it as it allowed for everyone to have equal rights and an equal choice in our society, equal voice in our society. I was brought up to think that the democratic system was the perfect system, but as I grew up, I quickly realized that democracy was far from that. The first time I vividly remember asking myself about the flaws of the system was when I was 16, watching one of my favorite artists, Meek Mill. In his song 1942 Flows, Meek speaks about his negative experiences with the legal system. Now, being 16 years old at the time, watching the music video through MTV, for some reason, the video spoke to me more than anything else. For the first time, it really made me question why the institutional system in the United States was as flawed as it is. Now, fast forward to 2019, when I decided to concentrate into legal studies. I knew that I wanted to make a change. And for some reason, the experience I had years before with Meek Mill stuck out to me. Intrigued by the institutional system and why exactly it was that inmates were finding themselves time and time again into the system. As years went on, I did more and more research through the multiple classes I took. Each time, I thought about the question of why. I asked myself why inmates did what they did, and ultimately, I discovered that the whole time I was actually asking myself the wrong questions. Just like myself, the question that many Americans tend to ask themselves about inmates is why exactly is it that they commit these crimes or do what they do? They ask themselves, why is it that inmates are such bad people? The one thing that many Americans never really do, though, is stop to think about how, as a democratic society, that may have failed them. Nowadays, we live in a society where we're all quick to point fingers when convenient, but don't stop to think about the topics that matter most. With the topic of prison inmates, we must ask ourselves how we can instead get them back into becoming functioning members of society once again. Going through my Capstone project this semester, this was indeed my research question. I wanted to find out whether or not inmates were able to be rehabilitated back into society, or if inmates were indeed a lost cause. Now, while thinking about how broad this issue is in the United States and how long of a research project this may become, I quickly shifted my focus into the California legal system. Instead, as California tends to be the leader nationwide. I knew that if I was able to find evidence that California inmates were able to successfully rehabilitate, then there would be hope for the rest of the inmates all across the nation. Now, in regards to my Capstone project and results that I found that the results show that there was indeed faith in the inmate rehabilitation. What I found through my research is that current resources being spent on inmates aren't being spent in vain, but instead are making a difference in these inmates' lives. When it comes to inmate rehabilitation, my research showed that the biggest variable to success was time. And then in order to bring these inmates back into society, this will ultimately take patience. My research showed that this isn't an issue that will be solved overnight, but from what I found through serving Californians is that most residents are willing to wait and support inmates so that they can have a second chance in life. Through interviewing a former inmate, I also learned something important, and that is that most inmates are willing to do anything in order to have a second chance. Hearing this evidence, it showed me that it is indeed in us as a democracy to help and support them.
so that they can make a comeback into society and have their voices be heard once again. Coming from an environment where very few make it out, I knew that I only had one opportunity at my mission. And through my education these past 5 years, I've had one set goal, and that's to have my studies change the lives of somebody. Hopefully through my Capstone project, I will have brought light to the ones deserving a second chance behind bars. I'm honored, and thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alicia Bardwell, and I'm thrilled to share my research on how Black communities' voices are often unheard in our democracy. As a student in the Democracy in Crisis Past, Present, and Future class, my podcast aims to shed light on the pain experienced by these communities and find ways to empower them. To achieve this, I focused on the impact of two influential musicians and art activists, Tupac and Notorious B.I.G. Christopher Wallace, also known as Notorious B.I.G., used his music to speak up about the struggles of growing up as a Black man in Brooklyn. Despite his success as a musician, poverty and lack of opportunities pushed him to sell drugs. This is a stark example of how poverty and desperation can lead to unhealthy choices. In my podcast, I explained how he defeated his drug-selling lifestyle for more compelling reasons for living. Tupac's activism began with his involvement in the Black Panther Party, a political organization that fought for the rights of Black Americans. He recognized the power of his music to amplify critical social issues and used it as a tool to speak out against police brutality, poverty, and other injustices. Despite facing many challenges throughout his life, including the pressure to conform to narrow definitions of masculinity, he remained committed to his values, and he used his platform to advocate for positive change. As children, we are taught to believe in the power of democracy and our ability to make a difference in the world. However, as we grow older, we begin to see the shortcomings of our political system, particularly in how it fails to address the needs of marginalized communities. For instance, in many Black neighborhoods, the educational system is underfunded and inadequate, leaving young people with limited options for their futures. The prevalence of drugs and violence on the streets further compounds these challenges, leading to hopelessness and apathy. Reflecting on the legacies of Tupac and Notorious B.I.G., we see their impact as musicians and advocates for their communities. Their stories show us that even in adversity, we can use our voices to affect change. By empowering marginalized communities and giving them a platform to speak, we can create a more just and equitable society for all. The primary motivation behind my selection of these two studies was my father. He grew up as a Black man in Kansas, and moving to California was a courageous step he took to provide a better life for his family. Learning about his challenges and the experiences of these two rappers inspired me to reflect on my community and background. It prompted me to consider how I could positively impact people like us. I hope that my research inspires you to think more about these two legendary rappers and the power of change. Over the past 6 months, I've had the pleasure of learning so much about Black communities and how we can create a more just and equitable society for all. I will leave you with the words from Tupac. You never know how strong you can be until being strong is the only choice you have left. Thank you. A warm welcome to Jonah Bernstein.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonah, and my presentation is called Shakespeare, an analysis of queer theoretical teaching methods of the works of William Shakespeare. I am an ESMP concentration, meaning I will be going on to teach high school English, if that was not plainly apparent by my long hair and my purpose. But for over 500 years now, William Shakespeare has been exalted as a universal genius. So much so that he is the only author mentioned by name in the California Common Core standards for high school English language arts. Now, I will level with you all and tell you my biases right now. I am 100% a Shakespeare fanboy. I have been reading, watching, and performing Shakespeare for about a decade now, and I love everything about his work. However, I am also fully aware that I am the exception to that, not the rule. As I can tell from the giggles there. You all had to read Shakespeare in high school because it's required by Common Core. And maybe you didn't like that, and that's okay. I'm not here to tell you whether or not you have to like Shakespeare. What I am here to talk about is how we can increase understanding of the work itself. Because maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't be forcing everybody to read work from someone who was alive 600 years ago. But if we are going to do that, because I can't tell California government what to do yet, the best thing we can do is prepare students and make the work as accessible and timely as possible. And through my research and my own personal experience directing a play of the same name, Shakespeare, I have identified 4 things that we can do to make this as real as possible. The first thing is incorporating performance as education. The plays that we have students read are plays. They are not novels, they are not books. They're not meant to be read and analyzed like you would The Great Gatsby. They are meant to be seen, they are meant to be performed, they are meant to be listened to. We are setting students up for failure by only having them read these plays and not letting them watch them, not letting them perform them, not letting them listen to them. So if we can incorporate performance, we can level the playing field for those students who struggle to read the language that is so different and is so old. 2, we can increase the literary and linguistic context surrounding the plays. Literary and linguistic context, big terms that are weird. This is most of the words that the students have to read in Shakespeare. So what we can do is increase that context that they have. Increase the number of works that they get to read rather than just the play. You can't go line by line, word by word through a 6-act play of the Scottish tragedy. I'm not sure how much we call this a theater. For all of my actors out there, we won't say the name. But we can't go line by line through that. What we can do is go line by line and word through word through a poem that has similar concepts and a similar idea and similar linguistic moves. So that way students can read that and apply that later on as they do inevitably have to read a little bit of the play, as they also listen to it, as they also watch it, as they also perform it. So if we can do that, again, we can level that playing field for students. Third, increasing the historical context surrounding the work. This is necessary because, again, he was alive 500 years ago. Things were different. For example, England was just starting their empire. They were starting to sail the world and take over other countries and take over other people. That matters because Shakespeare is writing in that context. The way you write about people changes based on how your society is treating them. That matters. If you're reading Romeo and Juliet, like most of you did in high school, most likely, the house Montague was a real house, and it happened to be the house that Shakespeare's patron, the Earl of Southampton, belonged to. That also matters, right? That reframes a lot of the context of that play, that Montague was a family that was important to him, and that's why they featured as the name in Romeo and Juliet. And finally, number 4, which leads us to the title, promoting the use of current literary theories on the works of Shakespeare, like queer theory, feminist theory, critical race theory, Marxist theory, all of that kind of stuff. People have this weird thing of gatekeeping Shakespeare, that we're not allowed to read it through our own modern eyeballs because it is old. Why are we reading it then? The point, like they mention specifically in the Common Core standards, that we read Shakespeare because the language is unique and challenging, and also because the themes are still present today in our present society. So if we're not letting students analyze it presently in this time, what's the point? So Romeo and Mercutio, yeah, they can be gay if students want them to be gay. Antonio and Bassanio in Merchant of Venice, they can also be gay if students want that. That's okay. And what that's going to allow is students to feel more connected to those characters, like they can actually relate to that character, like they can actually relate to the story and care about those themes that we say are so important. This, in turn, those 4 stages, I believe, will create a cycle of understanding. Students applying their own theories to characters, current theories, alternative theories. Then they might want to perform it a little bit more. They might want to take on that character. They might want to play Romeo or play Mercutio and play it with their own little spin. And then they want to read more about the sonnets that have those same themes about love triangles and such like. And then maybe they want to learn more about the history, which then again just creates more and more understanding. And then they can decide whether or not they like it. You can't decide if you like something if you don't understand it. Again, I'm not trying to tell all of my students that they have to like Shakespeare. That is for them to decide, and that is okay. I don't like all of Shakespeare, that is for sure. But what I do want is for them to understand it. Thank you. Now, please welcome to the stage my friend and yours, Zoe Atlas.
Hello, my name is Zoe Atlas, and I would like to introduce my project, Table Legs. I am in the creative writing social action concentration, and I have heavily focused on both written and performance poetry in my 4 years here. So my project is a poem that I wrote, braiding together some of the biggest inspirations in my artistic endeavors, Joy Harjo, Leonard Cohen, and Natalie Diaz. Specifically their works, Joy Harjo's poem, Perhaps the World Ends Here, which is a poem that talks about how the world begins and ends around the kitchen table, sharing stories, breaking bread. And that really inspired the vision and the title for my project, Table Legs, where I talk about food and ethics and capitalism in the theme of my class through the lens of each of the 4 elements, fire, earth, air, and water, as the table legs that hold up this universal platform that we all exist on. And Leonard Cohen's work, Who by Fire, which really touches on that birth feeds death, death feeds birth and life, and that is the cycle of food, and really breaking it down to those elements. And Natalie Diaz's poem, The First Body is the Water, which speaks for itself. So I'm going to share an excerpt from my poem today, parts 2 and 3, Earth and Air. 2, Earth. When I say body, I mean earth. A house of guests leaving their tracks in the sand, dangling on the cold cliff of grief. When I say grief, I mean someday all I'll have left of my grandma is her kitchen table, her coiling cursive etched into the dark wood as she lays down her mother's recipes to feed me forever. A wooden ladle, her fingers cradle. Her grief looks like her hand diving into the stained pot of sweet and sour cabbage with meatballs, no raisins, wiping the excess on the pot's lip, drip some on the marble. Her wrist quivers and lowers into a bowl as thick as the calluses sprinkling her hands. She walks the bowl over to me. When I say walk, I mean bare feet, bare soil, soul to soul, and throw some rhythm on it. When I say rhythm, I mean the moon and how she choreographs our wombs to bleed and plant seeds in the dark, to ripen and rise in the light, burn it down and take it from the top. When I say, have you eaten today? I mean, let me pour into you a color of love your cells can celebrate. Saffron, sumac, caraway, cumin. I mean, let me take you on a journey through my ancestors' tongues and temples, tessellating from the old city to my kitchen table. We have given birth on this table and have prepared our parents for burial here. When I say death, I mean an old door owning nothing and nobody. I mean reciprocity is gravity, bending your knees, bowing your fingers to sink seeds into soil. Turn earth and become something that remembers where it comes from. I mean, perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table. while we are laughing and crying, eating of the last sweet bite. 3, air. A is for atmosphere, B is for breath, of course, C is for chlorpyrifos clogging children's lungs, D is for DDT drips from a mother's breast in her baby's first meal, E is for economy, eclipses environment, F is for forever chemicals infest all states of matter, so get yours in any body of water near you. G is for 90% of global government subsidies inflaming the climate catastrophe. H is for hooray. Every country on earth agrees to ban CFCs, shrinking the hole in the ozone layer. I is for insecticides, insects evolve resistance to insecticides, made even deadlier. J is for justice for all breathing and breath-giving beings. K is for kitchen table. L is for land, lakes, lungs metastasize amidst Monsanto's moral failures and nefarious negligence. O is for organic food still uses biological pesticides. P is for pollinators and permacultures, which negates the needs for PFAs. Q is for quantum decay. R is not for reform. We are ripe for a food system revolution. S is for 60 years since Silent Spring screamed, we are running out of time. U is for universal undoing. V is never for violence. We are in the 6th mass extinction. All the more reason you must learn to breathe with ease. Thank you. Por favor, todos son otro fuerte aplauso.
Let's have another round of applause for all of our presenters.
Queremos dar la bienvenida a nuestros profesores de Capstone, David Reichard, Lee Richard y G. Abraham, quienes le darán un reconocimiento a los estudiantes. Empezaremos con el maestro Lee Richard. Por favor, los estudiantes en esta sección hagan fila en el lado vacío para recibir sus respectivos certificados cuando sus nombres son mencionados.
Now we would like to welcome our Capstone professors, David Reichard, Lee Richard, and Aji Abraham, who will recognize their classes. We will begin with Professor Lee Reichard. Will students in this section please line up on the side of the hallway and be prepared to come down when your name is called.
Thank you. I invite HCOM faculty to come join me on the stage to congratulate our students. Yes, you're alive.
Hey, get up here, dude. Ryan. It's alphabetical order. So you're after Ryan, that'd be.
Yes.
Mine is too much if I want to move. It's too much. You want to be in this pocket. Shaking hands. That's a lot of shaking everyone's hand? That's a lot. Okay.
My hands are sweaty.
Me too.
Yeah.
Microphone.
Oh. Thank you so much for joining me up here. I wanted to talk just a moment about the theme, hidden histories, the stories we tell. None of us. No. This is a theme that I've taught more than a couple of times for a senior capstone, but this semester it hits differently. In an era with books being banned and more division than I can remember, it's more important than ever that we listen to the stories that other people tell and are brave enough to share our own. Storytelling is a means of making ourselves known to others, and it's one of the first of early human accomplishments. Just a few years ago, people who look like me were astonished to learn of the Tulsa race riot of 1921. Systemic suppression of the survivor stories by the people who perpetrated this crime against a community of color means that most Americans were unaware. This is just one example of the many stories that our culture tends to suppress. We all have stories to tell, and this capstone theme asks students to think about the stories that they need to tell and those that need to be heard. The stories that might otherwise be obscured or ignored. We need to bring out from the shadows those stories that help shape who we are and how we interact with the world and one another as we work towards greater understanding and empathy. All right. Great. Yeah. Ryan Anderson. Yeah.
Boy.
Giselle Antonio. Bernstein.
Thank you so much.
Emma Borelli. Anthony Sipa.
Sappy.
There's Chauncey. Alexis De Paolis. Ina Diaz. Marissa Dorr. Ulysses Duenas. Sierra Fishman. Tia Gonzalez Gonzalez. Alana Hansdorfer. Parker Jones. Ashley Koha. Conlon Mahali. Savannah Mansfield. Stone McDonald.
Go Stone!
Sofia Moreno. Lucas Olvera. Connor Plant. Austin T. Jennifer Villafana. Catalina Villegas. If we could have Professor Reichert's students line up in the hallway out here. Now I'm going to turn it over to. Let's go.
Thank you. So while folks in my class are lining up in the hallway, I just want to say a few things about our section. This theme really resonates with me for many reasons. It's a topic that I've been really kind of focused on in my own work for a while and in my own teaching for a long time. But I think in the moment that we're living right now, it's something we really need to pay attention to in terms of the future of our democracy. And I wanted to spend some time exploring that with students. And when we started the semester, we watched a documentary about the January 6th insurrection and historical events that sort of led up to it. And I asked the students, can we just decide what we want to study together? And they identified a whole bunch of really interesting themes that we spent the rest of our time together looking at. And from those themes, they developed these wonderful projects. So it's actually the students that created this course. And they brought it together in such really creative and innovative ways. And I'm just so happy that I had a chance to work with them on this. So thank you all. Natalie Acosta-Canada. Susan Avila. Zain is not with us today, but Zaina Azubiadi. Alicia Bardwell. Catalina Santiago Barón. Alexi Burrell. Kim Cortez. Lali Galvan. Noah Goulart. Miguel Guerrero. Wheeler Henry. Ethan Jones. Ignacio Maravilla.
Translate that.
Jose Manzano. Estrella McDaniel. Lauren Nishimoto. Alyssa Phillips. Anthony Faziola, joining us by Zoom. Eric Regalado. Cole Rossi. Marisela Rodriguez Solis. Vanessa Cudwell. Sarah Trujillo. Jennifer Vila. Eva Lyman. Matthew Whitman. Emily Williams. Octavio Valdivino. Angela Zazzarino.
Hold on.
Certainly, and last but not least, I invite the students from Professor Abraham's course to line up in the hallway after.
Yeah!
Yes, everybody.
I have no doubts.
Yeah, I was
It's just like part of the culture. I think I hear you just fine. Yeah.
It's been a pleasure working with my students, looking at food from various perspectives. Actually, when I was initially offered to teach this course, I kind of looked at my colleague Murdula Mascarenas, who actually worked on this seminar last year on a similar topic. And now our students are actually really looking at food, given where we are, in terms of food insecurity. I actually just looked at the news today, everything from climate change to the war in Ukraine, and it goes food inflation as well. So food is a critical issue that we need to take seriously. Food is also integral to human experience. Food is also the last thing that we give up in any given culture. Our students looked at everything, broadly from factory farming to health, to systemic issues around food injustice, to various things around climate justice as well. So our students did fine work, and you'll see this displayed shortly, and I encourage you to meet with them and also congratulate them. So without any further ado, let me begin our certification. Zoe Atlas. Marina Baltazar. Sunny Brandwood. Nayeli. Irene Cruz is on Zoom. Brendan Lewis. Trisha Engels. Azul Garcia Andres. Hunter Henriksen. Renee Ibarra. Leah Jimenez. Marissa Lord. Vitlavi Asias. And finally, Michael Martinez. Alexandria Munoz. Hector Ramirez. Brianna Reyes. Daniela Rodriguez. Madeline Shepard. Melanie Sickler. Crystal Smith. Cynthia Vargas. Samantha Waldrop. Joanna Woodhams.
Hi, everybody. I'm back here again. It seems that our seniors are not going to be the only ones leaving us for new adventures in this world. We have two faculty members that we are sad to see go, but this is our moment to show our love, our gratitude, and our appreciation for them. And I will be the first, and these people are Maria Villasenor, yeah, and Daniel Summerhill. Maria Villasenor has been here 17 short years since she got her PhD from UC Berkeley in ethnic studies. We were actually almost in graduate school together. She started in 1990. Is it okay to say that? Sorry about that. Too late. I would have been starting in the class of 2000 at UC Berkeley, but for whatever reason, I decided not to go, even though one person in my cohort begged me to stay. But we wound up meeting each other and being able to work together for these last 6 years. And it's been wonderful. Maria has accepted a position to be Associate Dean of Liberal Arts at Sierra College up near Sacramento, her hometown. So this is going to be a wonderful and well-deserved homecoming for her, for the students, for the faculty, administration that will be able to thrive under her amazing leadership. If the last 6 years, or I guess 17 for her, are any indication, she'll do a marvelous job. Maybe even be a university president someday. But I want to share a few words real quick. I had the privilege of delivering a keynote at the Asian Pacific Islander DAISY graduation event last Saturday. And even though my keynote speech was supposed to be about the students and to a certain degree about myself, it was really about Maria. And I want to read the passage from it about Maria. Oh, yes. I didn't tell her yet. And this is just a part, this is not the whole speech. I said, this year is kind of a bittersweet year for me. My father passed away last month, which is enough bad news for 1 year. In addition to that, a person whom I consider a colleague, a mentor, and a close friend is leaving CSUMB. I never thought that day would happen, but not because she wasn't capable of bigger and better things. It's because she is the embodiment of what makes CSUMB special, and so special to all of us. It's the people. She brought us together, invited us to her home, took the time to hang out with us, mentor us, listen to us, celebrate our highs, comfort us during our lows, not just for me, but virtually everybody she knew. People like that don't grow on trees. And when you meet people like that, you better cherish them because they make your workplace, your neighborhood, and your life all the richer. She may be leaving CSUMB, but I'll always consider her an otter for life, which I will always strive to be, and which I hope you'll also strive for as well. So should we congratulate together or should I just? Okay, so please join me in giving a heartfelt show of love, appreciation, and gratitude for our very own Maria Villaseñor.
As Dr. Nguyen mentioned, Professor Villaseñor is not the only bittersweet note to this event. Professor Daniel Summerhill is also going on to another position, and I was invited to say a few words in appreciation of Daniel Summerhill, in part because I was the chair. I'll take credit for this, the chair of the search committee that brought him here to CSUMB. And I want to note that when it was a very competitive field, we had many applicants for the position. And if we were reviewing these applicants and their qualifications, and we came across Daniel's application, and we were, obviously very impressed and interested in bringing here. But the question came up, one of the members of the committee said, well, yeah, he looks great, but will he want to stay here? Will we be able to keep him? And we said, well, we can't let that factor in. We will bring him, but we saw that he was a star in the making. The constellation only grows brighter. And so with the prediction of that member of the committee is coming true as Daniel prepares to depart to take a position of creative writing at Santa Clara. So he won't be too far up the road from us. But I'll say a couple other things. So we made the offer, and to our great relief and gratitude, Daniel accepted the position, and Daniel's been with us for 4 years now. And I got to say, so we could say well, the prediction came true, but in those 4 years, he has more than doubled the expectations of what we might have expected in 8 years. He has been a stellar professor of not just creative writing and social action, but also composition studies. So he's carried 2 positions. He has been Monterey County's first poet laureate. He has been the voice of CSUMB in times of crisis and concern. I was asked, and volunteered. He's a new faculty member here. I've been here for longer than I care to admit. That I would serve as his mentor, and I gladly took on that role. But it took me very little time to realize that Daniel Summerhill needed very little mentoring, that he was going to be just fine. And as I come to understand that these quote mentoring roles evolved into a friendship, And so I am just, I'm grateful for the years that I've had Daniel as a colleague and as a friend and as a member of our campus community. It's with some sadness that we say goodbye to him, but as Dr. Nguyen said, hopefully Daniel will retain the spirit of CSUMB and consider himself an otter for life. And so with that, let's give some love and appreciation to Professor Daniel.
Daniel Summerhill is also one of the most gifted, talented, and dedicated parents I've ever seen. He's always spending time with his 2 children. And I guess now is the time, as good a time as any, to congratulate him on being the parent of a 3rd child. And with that, I'll turn over to my story.
Thank you.
Ahora queremos agradecer al personal y a los profesores de la escuela de HCOM por inspirarnos y guiarnos en nuestro proyecto. También queremos agradecer a los miembros del Consejo de Capstone por ayudarnos a organizar este evento.
At this time, we'd like to thank the staff and faculty of the School of Humanities and Communication, and particularly the Capstone professors for inspiring and guiding us through this journey. We also wish to thank the Capstone Council for the work in organizing this event.
Finalmente, se les agradece a los estudiantes de Capstone, los presentadores y los voluntarios quienes han dedicado mucho tiempo y esfuerzo para preparar este evento.
And last, we'd like to thank the Capstone students, presenters, and volunteers who have devoted so much time and effort in preparation for the Capstone Festival.
Muchísimas gracias a todos por habernos acompañado y que pasen una excelente tarde.
Thank you for joining us and have a beautiful rest of your day.
Thank you.